And welcome back to Punchline. Since the release of the BBI report, politicians and scholars alike have wasted no time taking stabs at the document that they say costs millions of shillings, but has not really delivered what they were expecting. Are we debating the real BBI report, or was this a last-minute diversionary document that was a far cry from what Kenyans, or more specifically Raila Odinga supporters, were expecting? Well, join me now to answer these questions and more is the Joint Secretary of the BBI task force, Paul Mwangi. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Surprised by those questions that seem to be emerging?
Very surprised. There's only one BBI report. We have it on the website. It's on www.bbi.go.ke.
Many people
and there
feel
will be
it's
no
not
other document.
a true reflection of the views that you received on the ground.
We received views and went through the process of trying to see what we can recommend to cater for the problems that people had said. One of the things that, for instance, the Prime Minister's position came in was on the fact that we needed to deal with divisive elections. And the question that was there was, how do we ensure that after every election, people have a role to play in government? And the complaint people had was that you ended up with only the president and even the deputy, who is his assistant, who does everything. And there was no opposition in the House. So we came up with the Prime Minister's position that does implementation of government policy, defends government in the House, and we created an opposition that also participates.
But even with that Prime Minister's position, you know, the biggest criticism of it so far is that it appears beholden to the president. It doesn't appear powerful enough, independent enough. How does the premier post, as envisaged where he's appointed by the president, can be dismissed by the president, really strengthen inclusivity or accountability?
First, when you're dealing with the position of Prime Minister in Kenya, you begin by a statement Kenyans have made over and over again, that they want to vote in the president directly. So at every one time when you're dealing with the position of president in the country, it's a person who's been chosen by a majority of the people. And we have very stringent requirements for one to be president. You have to do 50+1. You have to do 25% in the half the counties. So whoever comes with a very clear mandate that's obtained directly. So you can't come in and then turn him ceremonial. You have to deal with the fact that he will be executive, and that is what the people have given him. So what you're dealing with then is how do you then share the responsibilities of the executive between several offices. And we have said, for instance, that he has to come from the majority of the party. That means that the president does not have a free hand at all times as to who he wants to choose. And then he has to go to Parliament, and Parliament can approve. So if Parliament played its role...
But he can fire him.
Well, he could fire him, but the president is not going to fire a popular prime minister when he knows that he has the House with him, because then he is going to have political problems with the National Assembly.
We'll proceed with that, but let me just go back to the views. And on Twitter, Professor Herman Manyora is saying, more point blankly to you, if you like, tell us when the real report is coming out.
As I said, there is no other report. This will be the only report, and it is available publicly.
You know, it appears that some of the narrative that is being advanced around this is because there was much hype talked about a tsunami that was coming, that was going to sweep away the deputy president's supporters into the sea. And then when the document actually came out, you know, no tsunami appeared to be there. And that's why people feel it is heavily edited. Do you feel that politicians perhaps misrepresented the work of the task force?
As we worked, we kept giving the injunction and saying that we are not interfering with what politicians do. Politicians will have their own debate, and they will always have their own debate. They are the leaders, and they must continue doing what they do, which will be to try and lead people. Ours was a totally different task, and we went and honestly looked at the problems that they told us to look into. And somewhere along the way, the expectations will have to merge. All
right. There are those who are also angry about BBI, given the depth of the problems that the country finds itself in. They feel that BBI did not make serious, far-reaching recommendations. I want to quote one for you, who's written into us. Professor Alfred Omenya says, quote, BBI is calling for more dialogue, surely. We have many reports in this country from Krigler, National Accord, Agenda 4 etc. BBI does not refer to any of this. What more does BBI want Kenyans to discuss?
First, there is a misunderstanding of by some people what BBI was about. Because BBI came up because the two heaviest protagonists came together and decided that within their understanding and within the camaraderie of where they were at that time, that they could get something done. Mm-hmm. And they said that they had 9 issues, which they believed were the things that we needed to attend to, and which they could bring in their political capital into. and asked us to go and find out what is the solutions they can work towards. So BBI was not a constitutional review process, and we are not going to go and look at everybody else's.
It's not a constitutional review process.
It was not a constitutional review process. Secondly, we have made reference to past reports, and we are saying that we have a problem about sweeping things under the carpet. We have a problem about implementation, and that is something we asked them, the principals to address themselves to, that Kenya never seems to implement everything else. And yes, we have recognized the fact that all these the commissions have had reports that have never been implemented.
So it does not make reports like TJRC obsolete, in your opinion? We
were not there to redo TJRC's work. We were going to answer the question, why is TJRC never implemented? And not just itself, how many other things are not implemented, how many other laws are never obeyed. And that is why we said we were trying to deal with also the software issues, which we don't resolve. It won't matter which other document comes into place, it will never be implemented.
All right. There are those who also feel that the drafters of this report appear to have a very low opinion of Kenyans. For instance, the report says, quote, Kenyans are, quote, responsibility light and rights heavy society. Paragraph 45 says Kenyans seem to only know how to oppose, whether it is colonialism or other ethnic groups. Paragraph 7 says Kenyans seem to have a noticeable and destructive inclination to disrespect the law. Do you think that the problem with Kenya is Kenyans?
We do have our share in the problem, and we decided to go into an introspection of where we are as a people, and it is a fact that we have a very high disregard of the law. It's not just in public office, even in normal life, in everyday things.
Some would say that's blaming the victim.
No, we must take responsibility for what the role we also play, because so long as we keep thinking that the problem is just the leaders, nothing will ever change, because we will never take responsibility of how we ourselves keep contributing to the problem. We don't want corrupt public officers, but we want to bribe. It's not going to work. So long as we are also ready to bribe, there will always be corrupt public officers.
Which way should BBI go now? Should it go to Parliament? Should it go to the people?
The one thing, and I'll refer back to the person who's talked about further dialogue. We have gone and come up with recommendations which people are seeing for the first time. Some people possibly did not anticipate that those were the recommendations we're going to have. People will have to now comment on those recommendations. So somebody will have to go take the BBI report and start finding out what needs to go where. The things that will have to go into statutes,
right.
The things that will have to go to constitutional amendments. Somebody has to take that and then has to talk. I think they have to do some public participation in trying to find out if, for instance, we have said that we want the office of the Prime Minister. If you hadn't thought about that, what do you think about that now? And public participation is now a constitutional imperative. I think anybody who tries to go out drafting bills without having taken this through a process of public participation is going to end up in problems in the High Court. The High Court has quashed so many things that anybody has tried to do without public participation. So a process of dialogue must come because it's a constitutional imperative.
Okay.
Then we have to go to the question. There are two ways you can amend the Constitution, which is the popular initiative or Parliament. And people will have then to decide which is the better. Popular initiative involves more people, involves faster people, involves county assemblies, Parliament and Senate.
All right, Paul Mwangi, thank you so much for your time. When we return, two constitutional heavyweights join me, Yashpal Gai, Professor, and Kamodo Waiganjo. Stay with us.